Hi guys, welcome to another story time. Now this story time is a little different than most story times because it's not something that happened to me. It's a story that was told to me, and it was told to me by the subject of the story. About 30 some odd years ago, the group Rufus put out a new album, the one with Sweet Thing on it. So I had the tape. I was going over to a friend's house, and we were all going to listen to it. There were other people there, and we were all going to listen to the new album and drink some wine and just hang. So I met this girl there for the first time. She was my age. And I wish I could tell you what her name is, because she's still alive. Because if you heard what her name is, you would say, her mother knew what she was doing when she named her. Her mother must have been psychic. Her mother must have been able to see the future, because this girl's name fits her life to a T. And I guarantee you, there is no other female, at least in America, with that name. If there is another woman or female with that name, it's only because it's another language that has the same sound, and it's just a coincidence kind of thing. But for the purposes of this story, I'm going to call her Whitney. So for the next couple of hours, Whitney proceeded to tell me the story of her childhood. Now, we all have different childhoods, but Whitney's childhood could only be described as gothic. Stephen King or Alfred Hitchcock could have written her life story, or at least her childhood story. That evening, I was riveted, and I never forgot the story. And when I drive by a certain part of Los Angeles, I think about Whitney, and I think about this story. Now, the story really begins around 1950. Two black men from Louisiana migrated to Los Angeles with their wives. They both had government jobs. They both bought homes in the same predominantly white area. By coincidence, they were backyard neighbors. Their backyards touched each other. They found out they were both from Louisiana. They hit it off. They were around the same age. And also, they knew that their purchasing of their homes in that area had triggered white flight. Homes, that property was going up for sale around them almost every day. The two men decided to form a partnership and buy every house that went up for sale on that block. And they did that. So 10 years later, they owned the whole block. In fact, they had started on another block. 12 years later, one of the partners dies suddenly at 36 years old from a heart attack. He and his wife never had any children. She was only 26, and I will call her the widow. Now, the other couple had a son, and that wife was very ambitious. She went to college and became a social worker. The widow was extremely shy. She had no job, no church, no friends, no family. So the surviving business partner saw that the widow was very vulnerable, and he also saw that his investment was very vulnerable, and that there was the great possibility that some stranger that could come in, marry the widow, and then have access and a voice in the running of his real estate investments. That was something he dearly did not want to happen. He made a plan. The plan was to seduce the widow. And he seduced the widow, and after about a year, the widow became pregnant. And the baby that the widow had was Whitney. His only involvement now with the widow is coming there on a weekly basis to bring groceries. After the birth of Whitney, the widow becomes an alcoholic. Whitney remembers her mother taking her to various bars on Western Boulevard and going inside and drinking while Whitney had to stand outside as a little girl. So her social worker stepmother notices that Whitney is being neglected and uses her powers to remove Whitney from her mother's care. At that point, her father and her stepmother had her mother institutionalized. The business partner feels like mission accomplished. Her father to send Whitney to his relatives in Louisiana. She lived with various cousins and aunts from 6 months to a year, and this went on for 10 years. She was shuffled from relative to relative to relative, and she said it seemed like each relative was more superstitious and more crazy than the next. Then all of a sudden, while she was telling me this story, she was going through her mail, and she came across this chain letter that was really popular in the 80s. And what would happen, you would get this letter, it would be anonymous, you wouldn't really know who sent it to you. But it'd be a list of about 5 names and addresses, and instructions were for you to send $50 to the first name on that list. And then redo the letter, take that name off, put your name now in 5th place, and send it off to 10 people. And then in however many weeks, you would be the recipient of $50 from God knows how many people. Supposedly, right? And of course I would always throw those letters away, of course. But now Whitney, she jumps up, runs to the kitchen, turns on the flame on the stove, and sets the letter on fire. And then she runs over to the sink, and just as the flame gets down to her hand, she throws it to the sink, and she's gibbering something, right? All over the flame and stuff. And I'm like, she's muttering something, and then she turns on the water and puts out the flame, what's left of it, and she goes, I'll show them. Sending me a letter. Oh wow, I just been throwing mine in the trash. So she goes back and she sits down and she tells me that after about 10 years, her mother is now let out of the institution. Actually, it wasn't an institution, it was like a private care facility kind of thing. But anyway, after about 10 years, her mother is let out, and Whitney is allowed to come back and live with her mother. So she goes to Fairfax High. She has a pretty decent high school experience here in Los Angeles, but she's always going to be just a little bit off from those 10 years of being with a bunch of superstitious black magic practicing individuals, okay? She hangs out with Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5, and she goes to a bunch of their parties, and she, tells me about those experiences. When she was about 18 years old, her mother came to her and told her everything about what had happened before she was born. She also told Whitney that during those 10 years that she was institutionalized, her father had been using her money, her mother's money, to buy more real estate. He keeps telling her that he used it for her care, but he won't show her any receipts. At 18 years old, she got her an attorney and sued her father on her mother's behalf. Now, in the process of suing her father, he dies. So now everything goes into probate court, and she's going up against her stepmother and her half-brother, right? Both of whom she doesn't like. And after it's all said and done, she walked away with something like $20 million. She owned that first block of homes that went to her outright. She ended up going to an Ivy League school back east. She also has a graduate degree. She's in the medical field and has traveled all over the country practicing her profession. She's even worked in foreign countries, okay? In 2004, 2006, when the real estate market here in California, probably all over the country, was crazy, and these mortgages were being given to anybody, she cashed out. I don't like to count people's money. I was just trying to get an idea for this story. And my boyfriend, who's also into real estate, helped me with the research. He looked into some of the records for this story. He did see her name. She had to have over 100 pieces of property, ballpark estimate. And somewhere she could have cashed out in 2006 at somewhere around $500 million. Now she lives in a huge estate in Beverly Hills by herself. She has an adult son who is extremely talented. He is extremely talented and intelligent, and he is one of the developers of one of the most used apps in America. 95% of you that are watching this video has his app on your phone. So anyway, that's it. That's my story. I hope you enjoyed this story, and thanks for watching.
wear this battle, though you're not mine.